Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now. I'm Greg Matusky, your host. I'm also the CEO of Gregory FCA. We're coming back after a brief hiatus. I've been traveling extensively in January. In fact, I just came back from Davos, where I attended a track on AI. Very interesting, but no less interesting than our guest today. And I'm excited because next week is Manifest, the large supply chain and logistics conference taking place in Las Vegas. We're attending that. We do a lot of business with supply chain technology providers. I'm excited that Tanzil Uddin, the Senior Vice President of Production at Connectiv, who puts this conference together, has joined us. I really want to go into the vertical of logistics and supply chain with regard to new technologies, what he expects to see at Manifest, and what's exciting in technology. I got a quick question to start with. Did you ever think that logistics would be front and center of just about every conversation in global economics and the global economy?
Well, first, thank you, Greg, so much for having me, and that's a great way to start. The short answer is no, I did not. I personally have been blessed to be able to serve the logistics and supply chain space for over a dozen years now. And I think it's really obviously has propelled since what has happened during the pandemic. And now you're seeing how mainstream, if you may, supply chain has become. It's at front and center in a lot of publications and news channels. And it's there's no slowing down to it in terms of the amount of new participants and entrants that we are seeing. So it's certainly quite an exciting time to be in supply chain and logistics.
And before we went on the air, I was telling you that I have a tradition. I've worked in supply chain and logistics for a long time. And early in my career, they were one of the first movers and shakers with regard to electronic data transmission and managing data, because it is such a complex world. I think a lot of us don't understand just how data-rich supply chain is and how perhaps logistics was more ready to absorb what's coming here shortly or is upon us with AI. What are your thoughts about that and the transition that we're going to see in the near term?
Yeah, I think with data in particular, especially given where we are, and you touched on it earlier with the just emerging technologies that are becoming more and more prevalent, I kind of put them in phases. So the one phase is going to be how are we collecting or capturing that data? And then the second phase was, well, did we capture the correct data? How are we sifting through it? How are we filtering through it? And now there's a new shift of, well, going from collection to appropriate or accurate data to now insights. And so a lot of it is insight driven. How are we now deriving actions and making decisions based on the data that we've collected? So we're seeing a shift there where those that are accelerating or excelling are using that data appropriately and accordingly.
And we really are entering a new era. We're going, I think, from the age of information, which is data, right? And data is overwhelming. It's all around us, to the age of insights and intelligence. I mean, this is what I think the promise of AI is. It can relieve us from not the quality of the data, but the tedium of the data, and then lead us to understanding how to make advances. Where are you seeing it play out in the actual supply chain and logistics, this transition that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We're again blessed, or in an advantageous position at Manifest to have so many of the, let's say, the young entrepreneurs, the startups that are accelerating the space under one roof, as well as those that are using it, the leadership members from those supply chain organizations, whether it be a retailer, a CPG company, or manufacturer, even a logistics service provider. And we're seeing how they are now applying some of this stuff. And of course, AI is going to come up and how it's transforming in multiple areas of the supply chain. If I can think of one or two, I would say one area would be the supplier risk management and sourcing side, for example, where I am looking to leverage AI driven sourcing tools that will then help me ship suppliers quickly. Obviously, given where we are geopolitically and as risks arise, that's an ever more so important aspect to consider. So, seeing a lot in the sourcing or supplier risk side. If I also just think about the entire, let's say, visibility aspect of it, where I've got these AI powered control towers that then give me the real time tracking of my shipments. Again, which is ever more so important now, given where we are geopolitically, lots of disruptions and obstacles that have presented with the supply chain, really in the past 12 months or so. So that's where we're seeing it, and excited to hear from a lot of these leaders on site next week at the event.
And it's crazy the level of risk management that goes behind this. I think that, again, that's overlooked with regard to understanding of the quality of your providers, the bankability of your providers, but also the ability to make instant decisions and flip over. I was reading an article recently with regard to the last round of tariffs when Trump was in office, and there was relatively quick turnover with regard to going to lower cost countries such as Vietnam and even Mexico, and that doesn't seem to be going away, does it? I mean, those traditional supply chains were disrupted with the pandemic, if I understand correctly, and maybe that broke some of those bonds or provided us with insights of where else you could source product. Am I wrong there, or what do you see?
No, I think you totally hit it on the nail there. We've seen a lot of organizations already consider these strategies, and like you said, whether it be tariffs, the pandemic, have accelerated that journey that they're in. So the terms nearshoring or reshoring have always come up, and it's been ever more so compounded, I would say, over the past couple of years. And there's no slowing down to it. So, like you said, Mexico and other regions where organizations are looking to, whether it be proximity, convenience, cost, whatever the case may be, they're looking at those respective markets and geographies, and looking at the labor market and everything that is involved with moving their sourcing or even distribution to certain regions. Again, whether it be getting closer to their customer or whatever reasons they have. But we are seeing a lot more of that happening with different organizations, whether it be a telecoms company, for example, a retail company, a manufacturing company. So again, another issue that will be addressed at scale at next week's event.
Well, let's talk about some of the surprising things that you're seeing coming about. I mean, I've been to a number of conferences, and for instance, I was at MIT, and they were talking about small models, small foundational models that didn't need internet connectivity because when you're out in the middle of the ocean, if you're in Mauritius going to India, you're not going to have perhaps even satellite connectivity. I thought that was pretty cool that it could still operate AI on the edge, right? So, what have you seen that's really been cool and exciting, and maybe blew your mind? Seeing you've seen so much, and you're such an insider here.
Yeah, no, what's exciting for us, well, first of all, I'll say is just broad level, how the conversation around AI has shifted, right? Because at first, what we heard was, it originally was, well, what are the use cases? What are its values? How can we derive its value? How can we apply it? To now, there seems to be a shift to what's next? Where else can we apply it? So, one of the exciting areas was where I first was seeing people or companies use it for the customer experience and even chatbots, right? They have these word
Right,
agents already
right.
set.
That's
And
where it
it's
all started, right?
right. That's where it all started, and now it's being applied across fraud detection and compliance. For example, I touched on the visibility end, even as granular as looking at routing and optimization, and how am I even applying this technology to optimize my delivery routes? And this is being done in real time, right? So I think that what's exciting is just that shift of how are we even going to apply it to, okay, what's next? Where else can we use it? And so all of it starts from a lot of these organizations, and I'm thinking about the BCLs or the shippers here, where it's all about internal change management and the development of their capabilities to be able to have the foundation and apply technologies and exciting stuff that's out there. But it really starts internally and how they're really having the structure in their company to be able to tack on things as they start small and kind of accelerate from there.
Well, it's interesting because I think I had an epiphany. This is probably old news to you, but when DeepSeek came out, there were a lot of questions, and did they really do this? But I looked at it and I thought, that's optimization. They found a way to make a more elegant algorithm to take parts and reduce the coding somehow, right? And that type of optimization is something that the supply chain can always be doing more of, right? You can always try and strive to do more with less. And I think that's a part of the logistics challenge that, again, makes total sense. But how do you do it just off human imagination and intellectual capabilities? It's very difficult. This is planning some of the most complicated factors in the world. It's like weather forecasting. It's like stock market forecasting. You can't possibly, as a human being or even a great computer code, take into account all the changing variables. And I think there's a lot of room for that same kind of thinking within supply chain and logistics in trying to reduce the number of steps and create a more elegant solution. Your take on that?
Yeah, and to add on to what you just said, it's all going to revolve around not only what I mentioned about the internal part, that's change management and what I need to do as an organization, but then the partnerships and collaborations. And this is what we are very excited about at Manifest is the startups are there, the amount of startups that exist in our ecosystem. And so the young and new emerging technologies are there. And so it's really about how do we bring these companies into our ecosystem, whether it be more established organization or those that are more quote unquote nimble and can tack on some of these solutions as they go. But all of it is around, well, can we first understand that it all revolves around what are some of the challenges that we're trying to actually solve? What are our actual needs? Can we put it in rank order? Once we've identified that, we can then look into what are the technologies that are available in our ecosystem. How can they help solve some of these challenges? Maybe we start with a small pilot and then we build from there. But what we're seeing, it's really the collaboration aspect from both sides of if we're going to use these in our ecosystem, we'll start small, we'll develop with you, we'll help you develop your solution. And I think those that would be considered the leaders are leading towards that of working hand in hand with the startup companies that they identify fitting for their ecosystem. So I think we'll see more and more of that, those collaborations that are happening in the supply chain space.
So it was startups. Let's stay on that topic. Where do you see investment going? There during the pandemic, there was a mass rush for investors to get into it and find new ideas. And it cooled off, right? Now we've got a whole new realm of challenge, geopolitical instability, compounded with tariffs, compounded with a new administration, with a new worldview. What are you seeing with it? Talk specifically to the startups. Do you see a good environment emerging, a better environment than it has in the last year? What's your outlook?
I think it'll depend, right? So where we have and are still seeing investment going into would be centered around those that are in the automation space. How am I automating my supply chain? This can be via robotics, but also the software tool slide. So that doesn't seem to be slowing down. We've seen a lot of funding happening over the past couple of years. What are seeing and excited about let's say in the near short term is, well, we talked about AI. It's who is actually identifying the challenges that need to be solved. So I can think of certain companies that are participating at Manifest next week, for example. We have a format where it's a more private offering where your chief supply chain officers and chief operating officers will be in one room and they'll be able to engage with some of the startups that we picked out. Some of them can be borderline startups based on what criteria you have. We looked at the late stage players that are actually applying their technology into these supply chain organizations. They're actually understanding the challenges that the organizations face. And so I can think of like a Shipium, for example, or a Gideon or a Tive. These are companies that, have, I mean, one of them I think has over 900 customers. And so they're really applying and accelerating with their partners. And so we'll get to hear from some of them of their use cases and how they're tangibly working with these supply chain organizations and their leadership members. So yeah, I think that's where the industry is headed, where you're seeing the funding to answer your question in short. Again, it's automation, robotics, that still continues to be a trend. We have some talks about electrification, autonomous vehicles as well. Obviously, we're seeing where that's headed, just given the current political environment, if you may, which we don't really get into at full scale at Manifest, but it is something that is discussed. At least there are a couple of panels that still talk about the current state of the autonomous world, the electrification world as well.
We'll come back for a second. Just that ability for the collaboration. You have supply chain managers and startups. One of the big risks with tech right now, I think, is that young entrepreneurs get involved, or older entrepreneurs, they get enamored with the shiny new thing. And they don't really know if that fits a need, right? They build it, they add it. I mean, I do this even myself with custom GPTs I build. Wouldn't it be cool if it did this? Well, I made it do that. There's no real app. No one's ever going to use that. But hey, I did it, right? And that collaboration is very important to really moving the industry forward and be able to listen. So I compliment you on that. And I think that's one of the things that really differentiates Manifest, is that it's not just a trade show or a conference. It really is a collaborative affair. And really, with these emerging technologies, collaboration becomes so important, right? We as an individual or a company, none of us can stay up to date on the latest and greatest, right? The only way we learn is really by interfacing with each other. I do it with X. I do it with going to conferences. And the value of a conference like Manifest is it can serve as kindling for an entire industry to really optimize and improve operations all the way up the food chain. So I compliment you there. Let's go back to one quick thing, because it's always interesting and it's always clickable. Autonomous vehicles, right? Where do you think we stand, and how far off is it? And is it a threat to that individual who's living in the Midwest somewhere, who drives an 18-wheeler and from Detroit to Tallahassee and could shortly find that his job's being taken by an autonomous vehicle? What do you think?
So I cannot speak to how far along I think we are. I think what I'm seeing is there are still those that are in maybe leading the space. So we've had like the likes of Einride, Kodiak Robotics, for example, that have participated, and we'd still continue to invite for a show like ours, Torque as well. And so you are seeing those that are still trying to accelerate this. And I think what it comes back down to is, of course, the talks of from the political landscape. You'll have talks from the infrastructure. Infrastructure is always going to come up. But there are those players that are really applying this in their day-to-day and trying to accelerate with their partners. On our keynote stage, we actually have Daimler and Greenlane taking the stage to speak just about the EV side, not just autonomous, but what they're doing on the EV space and how they're working with all stakeholders. I think that, to your point about collaboration, this is ever more so key or critical for the autonomy or electrification space, right? Where you're going to have to engage with both public and private continuously. So, I mean, personally, if you ask me, I'd love to see it continue to accelerate, and I'd love to see the fully automatic semi-truck or autonomous truck on the road doing the middle mile. I don't know how far along we are with that, or how far away we are from it, from seeing it kind of tangibly. But it is exciting to continue to see the talks happening at an event like ours, where, again, it is discussed on stage. It is talked about through our expo. We do have some of the technologies in display in our expo. So it's definitely one of those controversial, if you may, topics that we have at the event.
Well, we started our conversation by talking about how surprising it is that logistics and supply chain is now at the top of the conversation hierarchy. And I think it'll continue to be. But what amazes me also is that it is kind of the crossroads of so many technologies: drone technology, autonomous vehicles, EVs, data, AI, predictive analytics. It's as if it's risen to the top of our tech stacks and in our conversations, and that's probably a function of the global economy and how it's been transformed. But it's also because it incorporates so much of the real world with the world of data and IT, right? I mean, in the end, you're really moving stuff. You're not just building CRMs where, it's zeros and X's and zeros, where it's all digital. In the end, there's real impact to consumers, there's real impact to businesses, and there's real product being moved around the world. So it's a fascinating space, and I'd like to thank you for being here today. It's always interesting to talk to somebody who puts these conferences together, because they have a broader view than individual participants. They can see the whole thing, and I think that proved it here today, Tanzil. So I thank you for taking your time. We're excited to be there next week, and hope to be part of that collaborative discussion that you so put together so well. So I appreciate it.
No, absolutely, Greg. Thank you so much. It is quite fascinating indeed. I'm so glad that you'll be there next week. I definitely look forward to seeing you there and seeing you engaged with the community that will be there. So it should be quite a fun and fantastic show.
Well, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.